So, where do you guys want to look ahead here as far as our Bob Murray takes go? We kind of touched on it on our Patreon. This is the big topic we haven't touched
Yeah,
on,
40
at
minutes in and we still
least publicly.
haven't touched on it yet.
Not hiding from it, but we had to have, some detail as to what's going on. I think my take on it kind of just goes the same. If you were on our Patreon show, you support and you were on that live on Thursday, stays the same. Asshole boss, kind of made people's lives hell. And ever since the Blackhawks situation happened, the league was told we better not find, or the league told the teams, put everyone on notice, we better not find out about anything happening that should be reported. So instantly this gets reported. The Ducks conduct their own investigation. Then they go, ooh, this is not good. So they get a law firm to conduct the rest. They're like, yeah, you should probably get rid of this guy. So he tenders his resignation. But I mean, the stuff that comes out, like calling and texting players and staff after games and freaking out. I mean, I'm not trying to make it sound like it's not bad and it's not a horrible work environment, but yeah, I imagine that he's not the only GM that does this in the NHL. And it was about time the big angry Bob probably left anyway. Just it sucks he went out on these terms.
Yeah, I think the thing for for me is, like, just from a hockey perspective, right? Like, Bob Murray, before this all surfaced, was a Ring of Honor level executive for Anaheim, right? Like, he might have been the first executive that you would have done in an Anaheim Ring of Honor, right? Because you do the Ring of Honor because you want to separate from, like, the actual guys who deserve their jerseys retired and just guys who mean a lot to the franchise in a way that is not quite like jersey retire level. Like, Cogliano would have been a perfect guy, right? Like, he's the guy that
Yeah.
goes in a Ring of Honor. He's not a guy whose jersey you retire. To me, Bob Murray, executive level, was that guy for Anaheim. Well, now what we found, ostensibly for the last 13 years, like, he's been making everybody's lives miserable, and in a way that is
He threw a chair in the press box when they lost Game 7 in 2009 and
right.
injured somebody
Like,
in that press box. Like
yeah,
he's had moments where we probably should have seen that he was like this.
no, for sure. That's what I 100% agree, right? And so, like, now what you have to do is, like, separate all the different things, and, like, yeah, it was time for him to probably move on. Yes, it sucks that this is what it took. Yes, it sucks that it took this long for this to become a thing. But, like, I think Getsy kind of said it the other day, like, this is still kind of, the NHL is still kind of going through a culture change, even on a very tame level, right? Because this has been kind of part of the conversation, and understandably so, which is the generational differences, as far as what is and isn't workplace abuse. And so, there are probably a handful of people who feel that they were abused by Bob Murray, who Bob Murray was like, I was just tough. And that is just creates a weird thing. But you've also got what very clearly seems to be an issue where people were just genuinely afraid of him in a way that's just unacceptable. Like, you can't be afraid of the executive in that way. And I think the other thing that we've seen here is the reality of having one man have sorry, him being in charge and being that important. Like, he's the guy. Like, he's been the guy for 13 years. Like, there wasn't anybody who really could have been in a position to address this with him other than owners and other than Schulman. So over the next 6 months, I imagine we're going to hear some things from
Oh, we're
those
probably going to
three.
hear some dirty stuff that comes out of this where you're like, wow, man, you said that or you did that. Like,
Yeah, but see, to
that's going to be
me,
a
like
tough one.
that, like, the thing for me is like, that's all expected, and I'm not looking forward to it. But it's not going to really change how I feel, because what he did was unacceptable. The way he treated people was unacceptable. The details don't necessarily make that more or less true, right? What I am very curious about is how do Schulman and the Samuelis respond to this as far as making changes in the way that they engage with hockey operations? Because I said it just last year. Like, I think Anaheim fans needed to be, I'll just say it the way I said it. Anaheim fans need to appreciate the degree of hands off that this ownership provides, because we can look around any league and see meddling owners who ruin their team by insisting they're smarter than the guys they have in place. To their credit, the Samuelis have never been that thing. The problem is now that we're seeing is they might have been entirely too hands off and entirely too detached, and so it creates an accountability gap. And so I am very curious.
Wouldn't you say though that kind of is coming out of you don't want to fix what's not, and things have kind of been broken the past few years, and it pretty much took a just horrible string of events that we found out about with the Blackhawks that they covered up in order for something as, honestly, it's not minor, but it's nowhere near the level as what happened with Aldrich in Chicago, where now this is being reported. I think that this comes to light where people felt like they had a way to say something about the environment they're in, and that's why. But I think the ownership didn't know that Bob was a hard ass. There's no way they didn't know.
Right, and that's my question, right? Where is the gap? Because there, again, like we've said, there's a difference between just being a hard ass and being abusive. And if they didn't know he was being abusive, I am sympathetic to them not having that information, but it's their responsibility.
See, my issue with that is
it's just a leadership too below Bob as to where they can
exactly who's if you're a player or a staff member who doesn't have a lot of leeway or say or power or whatever it is how are you going to go and approach the owners with that conversation about a guy who has almost as much power as anybody in the organization? Like, you're gonna walk up to Henry Samueli when you see him in the hallway and be like, hey, like, listen, this isn't okay. Like, you don't have that ability necessarily to do that, or the confidence to go out and do that, because if Bob Murray is, like they're saying, is threatening job security, there's only one place you can go, and it's not the owners. We don't know, maybe made that not easily accessible to go and have that conversation with them. It's not easy, or I would not imagine it's easy to go and have the conversation with the owners as a staff, one of the cogs in the machine, about a guy who has this much power and this much sway in the organization, because it's your word against his, and this guy has a lot more power than you do to be like, yeah, I didn't do that, right? And it makes it a tough situation at that point, which is why I think this situation with the Blackhawks, where it's now, and the NHL hotline is what it is, and we won't get too much into that, but it's now hopefully opened up a way for people to speak out and for these issues to get resolved. And this is the first case of that, and we'll have to see how that develops and how that continues to go on. But all we know from this is a situation that should have been checked a long time ago. It finally has happened, and the right decision has been made, and Bob Murray no longer is a part of the Anaheim Ducks organization because of the things that he's done. And like you said, Pat, I'm sure not every instance is as bad as it's put out to be. I'm sure there are situations where you can classify it as him just being, old school hockey guy, hard ass, whatever you want to call it. But clearly there was enough instances in there that he was going over the top, being abusive, and in no instance is threatening job security in any way acceptable. So that's another notch in there. And eventually we'll probably see these stories come out. Like you said, it's just going to continue to get worse.
Well, it was pretty telling when you heard through guys like Greg Wyshynski on ESPN saying that his sources were like, oh,
well, like even playfully in articles.
Right. Surprising it came out, but no surprise.
We've saw like the GM.
He's always been
the GM review article like 2 years ago in the Athletic, where they just talked about who's the hardest GM to deal with, and it was like a playful article, and they're like, it's Bob Murray. Like, that guy is just, nobody wants to deal with that guy. Yeah. Like, it all adds together to the point where, like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Like, nobody was surprised when it came out that it was basically, he's just an asshole. Like, he's just rude to everybody, and he's verbally abusive, and he takes things over the top, and he goes way too far with it. Nobody sat back and be like, oh, not Bob Murray. No way. It's this guy. Everyone is like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that I'm clear, because I 100% agree with everything you said, Eddie, as far as everybody under Murray was not in a position where they would have necessarily felt comfortable to go forward. And that's why my thing is it's the owner's responsibility to create that situation. Whether that is, trying to go in and check in and just talk to people and see what's going on, whether it's instituting their own anonymous tip line through HR, like there is a responsibility as the owner of the team, as the head of, to make sure that your employees are in a safe work environment. And that's the part of this, to me, that is, I will say, unfortunate and frustrating, because I really do want to know more about how this all played out and how the Samuelis got to this point. But at the end of the day, like, all that matters is like, now he's gone. Hopefully, whoever they bring in to replace him takes, and hopefully part of the hiring process is that, like, look, you're not going to be an asshole, right? Like you're not just going to, like, get drunk and start haranguing interns at like.
No, but we know that guy's taking over is Jeff Solomon. There's no way it's
I don't know though.
Oh, yeah, I'm not.
He's the front runner, right? Like Jeff Solomon is the leading candidate.
Really, can you really see? Can you really see, like, Dave Nonis, like, really going to put him back?
I don't think Dave Nonis is in the running at all.
He's not going to get that position. I mean,
I don't think Matt's going to get it. If it's an internal hiring, it is Solomon. But I think there are more than a handful of people outside of the organization that will be legitimate.
It's indicative that they're waiting this long. They're going to draw this process out and wait till the summer because they're waiting to see who's available at that time when they go through the interview process. There's no interviews being made.
And they're probably also going to see how Solomon handles this. He has full reign. How does he handle the trade deadline? What's he do with his vets? How does he handle the kids?
I think I said this the other day. Like,
that's very important things that are going to be happening here in the next 6 months.
This is an audition period for Jeff Solomon.
Absolutely.
And they're going to see what he does. And it's not indicative of the Ducks' play at all. It's what he does and how he handles the trade deadline and key situations. Maybe the draft, if they get that far, free agency, contract extensions, everything like that. They're going to see how he handles and how he does. And there's going to be obviously a lot more you can see behind the scenes that we won't see that will determine that. And that will go into the interview process. And he'll have an interview and they'll talk to him. And I think he'll still be the front runner. But there'll be other guys that they interview as well. And there'll be a handful of names in the mix. And they're going to wait until the offseason to see who's available and take this process very slow, which I think they should. I don't think they should just hand Jeff Solomon the job without exhausting all their options, because this is an important decision for the Ducks. They haven't had to make this decision in a very long time. It's been Bob Murray for the last decade plus. So this is a decision that they shouldn't handle lightly, and they should take their time with, and they should interview more than just one candidate and not just hire from within, because it's easier to just hire from within. So I think Jeff Solomon is potentially the right guy for the job. I think he has enough experience to be that guy. I think his mindset and the way he approaches the game is a modern style, which I think could fit the players in the approach that the Ducks are taking here. So he checks a lot of boxes, but there's also a lot of other guys who do that as well. And you never know who you're passing up on unless you have those conversations and meet those people and see how they fit your organization. So I'm glad, for me at least, that they're approaching it this way, because I think it is the best way for them to approach it, because this is a major decision. This is the biggest decision the Ducks have right now for the future of their franchise, is determining who the next general manager is. Not contracts, not trades, not the draft, not anything else. This is not even, is Dallas Eakins going to be the coach next year? This is the most important decision the Ducks have had in the last 10 to 15 years, and they need to take their time with it.
Well, see, I feel like it's one of those positions where they go, hey, so-and-so just got fired. We're going to put in an internal job opening, but make it public. Don't worry, the job's yours. That's just what it feels like to me. I feel like that's going to be the case. Like, we're going to pretend like we're going to be interviewing everybody, but we brought you in for a reason. There's a reason why he's in a rim and not Martin Madden and not Dave Nonis. They're still assistant general managers, and they were here prior. That's why it points to that to me. I would be surprised if they go outside the org. I would, and I think a lot of that has to do with the players too, with the staff, right? We just got done talking about a a guy who has an alcohol problem, who was a GM and an asshole here for over a decade, no longer here. You're going to want someone to bring in that's everyone's familiar with, who they like. So unless they don't like these guys internally, I would be hard pressed if they bring someone in from the outside or from the outside.
Yeah,
But could be wrong.
I I will say this: if it's an internal hire, I don't think it's anybody but him. If you want to say that at this point in time, if for no other reason than he's already there, he has a track record as an executive, and he's going to have the opportunity to just be the guy for until this is over. I think if you made Solomon the odds-on favorite to walk away with this job, I think that's correct. But there's talk about Mark Bergevin not being happy in Montreal. There's Jeff Gorton, who doesn't have a job. Apparently, Kevin Weeks wants to be a GM. Apparently, George Peros wants to be a GM. Like, you've got Michael Fuda and Eric Tulsky over in Carolina. Like, there are always executives. You've got, I think one of the Rutherford guys has a job, Ray Shero. Like, there's just always going to be people who are going to have an opportunity to surprise. And so, I think I would take Solomon over the field, but I don't think that the gap is that big. But real quick, does anybody have anything they want to say about like the situation leading to Bob Murray resigning? Does anybody have anything else they want to add?
No, I think it's
okay?
It's all out there. I mean, we'll continue to get more details on it, but it is what it is. Like, at the end of the day, it's the right decision was made. He's no longer a part of the organization. He's hopefully getting the help that he needs, for a personal level, because, as much as he's been an asshole clearly to a lot of people, at the end of the day, we should all hope that he gets the help he needs and that he becomes a better person from it. So, there isn't too much left to say on it. And I think the best thing to do is now approach this from, okay, what's next for the organization? What are the next steps here for them to continue on and continue to build, hopefully, a competitive team?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see a reason in discussing Bobby.
Okay, so perfect. Here's my question. I was thinking about this on Thursday, but I saved it to today because I think it just makes more sense for this show than what we were doing Thursday. What do you guys think? I want both of you think the first thing Jeff Solomon should be trying to do right now is
trade his vets.
Yeah, I think you should be analyzing the roster and essentially along the same lines as what Pat said there. Analyzing who's on this roster, what he has, what the value of these players are, talking to other GMs, seeing what's out there, and then eventually making a decision on some of these players that he has to make a decision on sooner rather than later. Guys we've talked about before, Raquel, Manson, Lindholm. He needs to start that process now and start having those conversations for himself, because a lot of these conversations I'm sure he was privy to under Bob Murray, but he needs to now start having these conversations himself and finding out what these players are worth, what other GMs think, what's out there, what's available, because he doesn't have a ton of time before he's going to have to make a decision on some of these guys. So I think that should be the first thing he does here, is just evaluating his roster, talking to other GMs, and figuring out what the next course of action is.
Yeah, I think for me it's Lindholm. Like, just full stop, nothing else. Because, like, to me, I don't see a situation in which Raquel and Manson are on this team next year unless they come back in free agency. I think they're almost guaranteed to get traded at this point. I think the question now is, what is Lindholm? Where does he fit into the organization? And what does his next contract look like? Like, because to me, that is the biggest question mark, right? Like, because, we talked about it like in Eddy on the prospects episode. Like, there are offensive attacking defensemen in this pipeline right now. What there aren't are a lot of very stable defensive types in the system. I mean, one of them was Hunter Drew, and he's a forward now. So, you know what I mean? Like, I just think, and if they don't think that they can bring him back, then they need to move him out and see what they can get and all that kind of stuff. But I think Lindholm is singularly above everything else at this point, because the style of game he plays is unique on the roster, and his ability to be impactful on this team over the next 5 years is unique to the other guys as well.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think Lindholm should get a bigger focus than Raquel and Manson. I think for all three of them, you have to figure out what your approach is to them fairly quickly here. Are you going to keep them? Are you going to move them? And if it's the latter, what are their values out there? What are the options you have available? Which teams are interested? What are they willing to give up? Because those are conversations you're going to have to continue to have for the next couple months until it materializes into a trade. I don't think you make any move now, no matter what, but you have to start thinking about that and what your approach is going to be with these players. And in my opinion, and obviously, Jeff Solomon's a lot smarter man. He's in the position than I am. But you got to make a decision early here on what your approach is going to be with these guys. Are you planning on keeping them around long term, or are you planning on moving them? And then from there, develop a plan on how you want to approach that. I don't think you can leave it in limbo and say, oh, I might move him, I might not, I might re-sign him, I might not. And especially with Lindholm, if you're going to have a conversation about contract and term and value and how much it's going to come down to, that's a conversation you have to at least start thinking about now and then approaching it later. I don't think you approach the player into the offseason, but you need to make a decision if you're going to have him around, and if you are, what the likely term and cap hit's going to be and how he's going to fit into your roster and who needs to go out to make that fit. And that's a decision, especially for Lindholm, if you're thinking of keeping him around, that needs to be made relatively soon, because
he's getting 8x8.
Yeah,
man.
and if he is right, that impacts any decisions you make for the rest of the season at the deadline in free agency. You got to make that determination now if you're going to keep him around or not, and that maybe goes with talking with the player's agent, seeing where they're at. If it is true and Lindholm wants to test free agency and that's the route they want to go, then you have to resign to the fact that maybe you have to trade him, and then you could have those contract discussions potentially in free agency if he's gone and talked to other teams and allowed him that courtesy, and then he wants to come back. You can do that then, but you need to find out early on here what the plan is, and then start, making your decisions and your plan based off that.
For sure, makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. I think he's the most interesting one at this point, right? I mean, I think him and Gibby at this point are the two most interesting players, because to me, they're the two players who can be the most beneficial even with this next group. Or the most effective and impactful, even with this next group. But if they don't necessarily think that those two guys' timelines are quite where they're at, because, maybe they're looking at this and they're going, yeah, we can't expect Gibby to be this great, this much, and get this kind of quality backup goaltending, and have Troy Terry on a point streak, and only what that means is we're second in the Pacific, which is bad.
Such a bummer that Gibby came into this organization probably about 5 early.
Yeah, what? Like
5 years too early. If he had been like in his second or third season now, then this is like the prime time for this team to kind of be going forward. It's going to be really, really something to look at how this team performs if he remains here in Anaheim, which I hope he does. But he's got a great cap hit too. But he also wants to win, so that's going to be. There's a lot of question marks, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, Steve, with Lindholm and Gibby. The other guys, we've all kind of talked about it ad nauseum about they need to leave. We need to find a way to get rid of these contracts. So, and there's a lot more to it, right? Player personalities, leadership qualities, those all do matter. And when you're talking about a group and developing a core, so we'll see what happens here. But I still think it's like you guys. We've all agreed this is Solomon's chance. See what happens here in the next 6 months and see what the Ducks do. But guess we'll get there first.
Yeah, no, this is his tryout, man. This is his chance to prove that he's the guy who can do this and
be the next Brian Burke. Bring fighting back to Anaheim.